Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
Oh, no! I knew it. I knew we wouldn't get 10 seconds in without you doing the voice.
I had to. It is physically impossible to see the name Carole Baskin and not hear that specific, slightly high-pitched floral-crowned greeting. It's embedded in our cultural DNA at this point.
It really is. It's the official soundtrack of the early pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah.
You hear that phrase, and suddenly it's March 2020.
Yeah.
You're wiping down your groceries with Clorox wipes, you're trying to make a sourdough starter, and you are absolutely 100% glued to a docuseries about redneck tiger breeders.
It was a total fever dream. But here's my question, and I want to be honest with you right off the bat. Are we really doing a deep dive on a meme?
Ah.
Because I feel like we all lived through the Tiger King hype cycle. We laughed, we made the jokes about the sardine oil, and then, we moved on. Is there actually enough substance here for a full conversation, or are we just rehashing old tabloid fodder?
That is exactly why we are doing this, because the mimification of Carole Baskin completely swallowed the actual story. It buried it.
You think so?
Absolutely. When you strip away the dramatic Netflix editing and the music videos and all the internet conspiracy theories, you are left with a biography that is startlingly dark, legally dense, and believe it or not, surprisingly consequential.
Consequential how? I mean, beyond being a pop culture footnote.
Well, think about it this way. We treat her like a joke character, right? But this is a woman who went from being a teenage runaway slipping under cars to passing federal legislation that dismantled an entire American industry.
Okay, when you put it like that.
That arc from homelessness to literally a White House signing ceremony is wild, and it gets completely buried under the did she or didn't she kill her husband discourse.
That's a fair point. I think most people, and I'd include myself in this, know maybe two things about her. She hates Joe Exotic, and her husband Don vanished under mysterious circumstances. The rest is just a blur of leopard print.
Precisely. So the mission today is to step out of the Tiger King editing room. We are going to look at the raw source material. We're talking court filings, real estate records, legislative history, and her own biographical accounts. We're going to try and figure out who Carole Baskin actually is when the cameras aren't rolling.
And I've looked at the stack of notes you sent over for this. I have to say, the early life stuff, I was not prepared for that. It's gritty. It feels less like a quirky documentary and more like a survival thriller.
It creates a psychological profile that I think explains everything that comes later. You can't really understand why she fights so hard for big cats until you understand what happened to her in 1975.
So let's start there. Before the cats, before the millions, before Joe Exotic. Who was Carole Ann Stairs?
Okay, so she was born in 1961 on an Air Force base in Texas. But the story really starts in Florida when she's just 14 years old. And this is a heavy place to begin, but it's the cornerstone of her entire identity. She reports being gang raped by 3 men who lived across the street from her family home.
14. My God.
14. And here is the part that seems to have just hardened her against the world. She claims she received 0 emotional support from her family afterward.
None.
0. She was in a strictly religious, very conservative household, and the sources suggest the attitude was very much, don't talk about it, sweep it under the rug, this is shameful, we don't air our dirty laundry.
That's isolating in a way I can't even begin to quantify. You're a child, you go through this horrific, life-altering trauma, and the people who are supposed to be your safety net just let you free fall.
They cut the net. And so she reacted the way a lot of traumatized teenagers react. She ran, she just bolted, she dropped out of high school, she left home with an employee from the local roller rink. And this wasn't a gap year adventure, this was pure survival mode.
The details in the research about this period are so intense. She wasn't just, staying with friends, she was hitchhiking up and down the East Coast between Florida and Maine.
Back and forth, sleeping under parked cars to stay out of the rain, scrounging for food. It's a really bleak picture. But there's one detail from this era, what I call the Datsun truck era, that I think is the key to unlocking her entire psyche.
I know exactly the one you mean. She eventually saves up enough money to buy this beat-up old truck, and she sleeps in the back of it. But she's not alone.
She is sleeping in the back of a Datsun truck, homeless, with her pet cat.
It's such a cinematic image, isn't it? A teenage girl who feels unsafe in the world of men and betrayed by her family, curling up with a predator, albeit a very small one.
It establishes the binary that I think defines her entire life. Humans are dangerous, they're unreliable, they're judgmental. Cats are safe, they're accepting, they're loyal. If you look at her life through that one lens, the obsession with the sanctuary makes perfect logical sense. She isn't just saving tigers, she's surrounding herself with the only beings she feels she can actually trust.
Right. It's like she's building a fortress against the world she escaped.
Exactly. A fortress full of predators who she sees as victims, just like herself.
But, you can't live in a truck forever. She eventually lands back in Tampa. And this leads directly to her first marriage, which, reading about it, sounds like a complete disaster from day one.
It was absolutely a product of the times and her extreme vulnerability. She's 17 years old. She gets a job working at a department store. She moves in with her boss, a man named Michael Murdoch.
The power dynamic there is already screaming red flag. A 17-year-old employee, her older male boss.
A huge red flag. And she is very, very blunt about this in her biography. She states clearly that she never loved him, not even a little bit. She married him in April 1979 for one reason and one reason only.
Her parents.
Her parents. They were deeply disappointed that she was living in sin.
That phrase, living in sin, it really just anchors you in the cultural pressure of the late 70s, especially in the Bible Belt. She literally trapped herself in a loveless marriage to appease the same parents who allegedly ignored her trauma.
And it backfired almost immediately. She becomes a mother at 19, but she describes the relationship as deeply abusive, possessive, controlling, violent. Which brings us to 1981 and the incident that changed everything, the potato incident.
Okay, I have to pause here. When I first saw the potato incident in the outline, I thought it was a typo. You have to walk me through this because it sounds completely absurd.
It sounds ridiculous, but in the moment, it must have been terrifying. It's a night in October 1981. She's 19. She says Murdoch attacked her. In her desperation to get away, she grabs the nearest object she can find in the kitchen.
A potato.
A potato. And she hurls it at him. It apparently surprised him enough to buy her a split second of confusion, and in that moment, she bolts.
It's literally fight or flight with a potato.
She runs out of the house. She has no shoes on. She is barefoot. She is 19 years old. And she is running down Nebraska Avenue in Tampa in the middle of the night. Now, for anyone who doesn't know Tampa, Nebraska Avenue in the 80s was rough. It was known for street crime, prostitution. It wasn't a place you wanted to be walking alone at night, let alone barefoot and fleeing an attack.
And this is where the movie script kicks in. Because a car pulls over.
A car pulls over, and inside is a man named Don Lewis.
The Don Lewis. The man who would become the center of this decades-long mystery. What was he like back then? Was he already the millionaire eccentric that we hear about?
He was a self-made man and significantly older than her. He was already wealthy, or at least well on his way, and importantly, he was married.
Right.
But he stops, he picks up this barefoot, terrified girl off the street, and that single encounter changes the entire trajectory of her life forever.
I think the popular narrative, the one from Tiger King, is that she was a gold digger.
Yeah.
That she saw a rich guy and latched on.
Mm-hmm.
But the timeline doesn't really support that simple a story, does it?
It's much more complex. They do start an affair, that's true. They are both married to other people. But she doesn't just sit around spending his money. She becomes, in many ways, the architect of his growing fortune.
How so?
Don Lewis was good at, let's say, spotting opportunities, but Carole was apparently good at executing the details. She had this incredibly sharp, intuitive mind for systems and paperwork.
This is the part that really surprised me. She's a high school dropout who'd been homeless. How is she suddenly managing a complex real estate empire?
It seems she just had a knack for it. By 1984, she's the one handling the business. She's helping him buy and sell property. She's navigating the complexities of tax deeds. She's dealing with foreclosures. This requires a level of financial and legal literacy that, frankly, most people with MBAs struggle with, and she learned it all on the fly.
So she wasn't just a passenger in his success. She was the co-pilot. She was actively building the wealth.
Absolutely. She helped build the very wealth that would eventually fund the sanctuary. They both divorced their spouses. They married each other in 1991. And the very next year, 1992, they buy a plot of land and start a business called Wildlife on Easy Street.
Easy Street. The irony of that name, given everything that happened there.
It was anything but.
Now, we need to clarify something really important here, because I think a lot of people get this wrong. When they started Wildlife on Easy Street, it wasn't a rescue, was it? It was basically the exact kind of operation she fights against now.
This is the crucial arc of activism that gets lost in the memes. You have to understand where she started to understand where she ended up. In 1992, they were breeders. They were buying and selling exotic cats for profit.
So they were part of the problem.
They were the problem, by her current definition. They had leopards, ocelots, all sorts of cats. They even had a bizarre side hustle using llamas to trim people's lawns.
Wait, llamas for lawn trimming? You mentioned that, but I thought you were kidding.
Not kidding. It was a real business. They were hustlers. They were trying to monetize these animals in any way they possibly could. They were part of the trade. They were the people supplying the cubs that end up in roadside zoos and private hands.
So what changed? What was the turning point? Did she just wake up one day and have a moral epiphany? Or was it a more gradual process?
The sources point to a major shift around 1996 or 1997, and it seems to be the realization of the brutal math of breeding.
The mass.
Yeah. Think about it. If you breed a tiger, you get cute, cuddly cubs. Everybody wants to pay $100 to take a photo with a cub. It's a cash cow for about 8 to 12 rents.
Right.
But that cute cub grows into a 500-pound apex predator in 6 months. It eats 40 pounds of meat a day. It becomes incredibly dangerous and expensive. You can't keep it in your house. So what do you do with it? You have to sell it. You have to get rid of it.
And once you sell it, you lose all control of what happens to it.
That's what she realized. She was feeding a pipeline of abuse. She started to see where her babies were ending up. In tiny, rusted cages in someone's backyard, in basements, or worse, killed for their parts on the black market. So they made a decision. They stopped all breeding. They transitioned from a commercial zoo to a nonprofit sanctuary.
And this transition, this moral awakening, happens to coincide almost perfectly with the complete disintegration of her marriage to Don.
The two events are almost certainly linked. Don Lewis was a businessman, first and foremost. Breeding is profitable. Rescuing is a financial black hole. You can just imagine the tension that creates in a marriage.
Let's talk about Don Lewis.
Yeah.
Because the internet, and certainly Tiger King, has painted him as this sort of kindly, eccentric old man who was murdered and fed to tigers. But the documents from that time paint a picture of a guy who was, well, complicated, is putting it mildly.
Complicated is a very generous word. In her accounts, Carole claims he was sex-obsessed. She alleges he would regularly fly to Costa Rica, specifically to have affairs with younger women.
I remember that from the show.
She even notes this bizarre and humiliating detail that he would time these trips to coincide with her menstrual cycle. It's just a very specific and cruel detail to include if it's not true.
It's deeply personal. What else?
She also claims he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder shortly before he disappeared. She describes him as a severe hoarder, not just a collector, but someone who would dumpster dive, who would fill their 40-acre property with junk vehicles, scrap metal, broken appliances.
So you have this pressure cooker environment, a property filled with dozens of dangerous big cats, piles of scrap metal, and a couple whose marriage is actively imploding.
Exactly. And then comes the restraining order. This is the smoking gun for everyone in the Carole did it camp.
Right. July 1997. Don goes to a judge and files a restraining order. And in it, he explicitly writes that Carole threatened to kill him.
This is the second time she has threatened to kill me. That's the quote.
I mean, if you were a homicide detective investigating a disappearance, that is Exhibit A. It seems impossible to get around.
It looks incredibly damning on the surface. She threatened to kill me. It's right there in black and white. But we have to look at what the legal system actually did with that claim.
And what was that?
The judge rejected the order, threw it out.
Why? If someone goes to a court and says, my wife is going to kill me, you'd think the court would err on the side of caution.
You would. But Carole's counter-argument, which the judge apparently found more credible, was that the dispute wasn't about a threat of violence at all. It was about the hoarding.
About the junk.
About the junk. She was clearing out his piles of scrap metal and broken equipment while he was away in Costa Rica. He got angry and, she claims, filed the order as a legal maneuver to stop her from throwing away his stuff.
And the judge bought that.
It seems so. The judge didn't see a credible threat to his life. And this is the most crucial part for me. Don continued to live with her in the same house after the order was rejected.
That's the part that sticks for me, too. If I genuinely believe my spouse is plotting my murder, I am not sleeping under the same roof. I'm at a Motel 6. I'm gone.
100%. It strongly suggests the threat might have been a hyperbolic statement made in anger or a strategic move in a divorce negotiation that never happened.
Because it never got that far.
It never got that far. Because on August 18th, 1997, Don Lewis vanishes.
The disappearance. He leaves the house early in the morning and just never comes back. His van's found a couple of days later.
His van is found at a small executive airport in Pasco County. The keys are inside, But there is no flight plan filed, no record of him chartering a plane, no sign of him on any manifest. He just evaporates.
And then the war begins, not just the police investigation, but the battle over the estate.
Oh, it was vicious. On one side, you have Carole. On the other, you have Don's 4 adult children from his first marriage, and they despised her. They believed she was a gold digger from day one.
And then she produces the will.
She produces the will and a power of attorney, which gives her control of the entire estate in the event of his disappearance. The children cried foul immediately. They claimed the signature was forged. They said the language about disappearance was suspicious.
But she won, right? The courts ultimately upheld the documents.
They did. After years of legal battles, the courts ruled in her favor. She prevailed. She inherited the bulk of the estate, which was valued at several $1,000,000, including the all-important sanctuary land. Don was declared legally dead 5 years and 1 day after he vanished in 2002.
Okay, we have to address the meat grinder theory. Tiger King spent so much time on this. The idea that she killed him, put him through a meat grinder, and fed him to the tigers.
It's the most gruesome and therefore the most memorable theory. It's the entire reason the sardine oil meme exists. But let's look at the actual forensics. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office searched the property extensively. They looked at the meat grinders.
And what did they find?
The meat grinders on the property were commercial grade, yes, but for grinding chicken and other meat for the smaller cats. They were not giant industrial wood chipper style machines. To put a grown man's body through one of those, it's not physically plausible without dismembering the body into tiny, tiny pieces first.
Which would leave a massive forensic mess.
Yeah.
Blood, tissue.
A huge mess. And they found nothing. No human DNA, no blood evidence. And trust me, looking for trace amounts of blood in a sanctuary that processes thousands of pounds of raw meat is hard, but luminol technology is very good. They found nothing to suggest a murder took place on that property.
So despite the endless memes, despite the catchy TikTok songs, the official status of the Don Lewis case is?
It is an open, active cold case. There has never been any evidence found of a crime. No suspect has ever been named. No charges have ever been filed.
So what about that bombshell from Tiger King 2? I remember seeing headlines everywhere. Don Lewis found alive. They had a letter from Homeland Security saying he was alive and well in Costa Rica.
This is a perfect example of why you have to actually check your sources and not just trust a documentary's dramatic reveal. A lawyer for Don's family produced a letter, supposedly from Homeland Security, claiming that federal agents had made contact with Don in Costa Rica after his disappearance.
On the surface, it seemed like the ultimate smoking gun that exonerated her and made the whole thing a sham.
Except for one tiny, glaring problem that Carole Baskin herself pointed out immediately. The letter discusses events from 1997.
Okay.
The Department of Homeland Security was created in November 2002 in response to the 9/11 attacks.
Oh, right.
You cannot have a letter from a federal government agency 5 years before that agency even exists. It is a chronological impossibility.
So the letter was a fake? Or just completely wrong?
It was almost certainly a misinterpretation of a document from a different agency, like Customs or an outright fabrication. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office immediately shot it down. They released a statement saying, "We have not received any communication from federal officials that Mr. Lewis has been located."
So no, Don Lewis is not sipping mojitos on a beach in Costa Rica?
No, he is, for all legal and practical purposes, deceased.
So Carole is now a wealthy widow, running a growing sanctuary and dealing with this cloud of suspicion. And what does she do? She doubles down on the activism. She starts going after other big cat owners, and that inevitably puts her on a collision course with the mulleted one.
Joe Exotic, the clash of the titans, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object.
I think a lot of people view their feud as just two eccentric, fame-hungry people hating each other, like a standard reality show beef. But it was actually deeply strategic and ideological, wasn't it?
It was entirely economic, and it started long before the cameras showed up. Joe Exotic's entire business model revolved around one thing: traveling to shopping malls with baby tigers.
The cub petting tours.
Come pet a cub for $50. It was a cash cow. It's how he funded his entire operation. And Carole didn't just disagree with it. She attacked that revenue stream directly.
How?
She launched a digital insurgency. She had this army of online volunteers, her big cat rescuers, who would track where Joe was scheduled to appear. Then they would bombard the mall management with emails and phone calls. Do you know these animals are abused? Do you know the safety risks involved? Do you want this bad PR?
That is incredibly effective. Malls are massively risk-averse. They do not want controversy.
not at all. And it worked. The malls started canceling Joe's shows. He would drive his whole crew halfway across the country, set up his tent, and then get a call from management kicking him out. He was bleeding money. This wasn't just Carole's being mean. She was actively bankrupting him.
So Joe retaliates.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do it subtly. He does it on his bizarre, unhinged YouTube show.
He films himself shooting blow-up dolls dressed to look like her. He makes endless, vile threats. But his biggest and ultimately fatal mistake was the trademark infringement. This is where the legal weeds get really interesting.
Explain this to me, because trademark infringement sounds so boring and corporate. But in this story, it's the move that cost him everything.
It was brilliant, legally speaking. Joe realized that the name Big Cat Rescue had a good reputation. It was a well-known charity. People donated to it. So he decided to steal it. He rebranded his own roadside zoo and his traveling show. He started calling it Big Cat Rescue Entertainment.
No way.
Oh, yeah. He copied her logo design. He even got a fake phone number with a Florida area code that would secretly route calls to his zoo in Oklahoma.
That is diabolical. He was literally catfishing her donors.
He was trying to create what the law calls consumer confusion. He wanted people to Google Big Cat Rescue, find him by mistake, and give him their money. Or, even better for him, he wanted people to think her legitimate sanctuary was the one bringing tiger cubs to malls in order to destroy her reputation.
So she sues him. This isn't just YouTube drama anymore. This is federal court.
She sues him for trademark infringement. And it is an open and shut case. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2013, a federal judge orders Joe to pay Carole Baskin $1 million.
$1 million. For a guy who was already bleeding money and living out of a trailer at a zoo, that's an impossible sum.
It was the financial death blow. He immediately files for bankruptcy. But Joe, being Joe, tries to cheat his way out of it. He signs over the ownership of the entire zoo property to his mother for like $10. A classic fraudulent transfer.
To hide the asset. To make it look like he had nothing for Carole to seize to pay the $1 million debt.
Exactly. And the courts really, really frowned on that. It took years to unwind, but eventually the judge ruled that the transfer was illegal and void. And the remedy for that fraud. The judge gave the land to Carole.
This is the part of the story that still feels like it's from a movie script. The court literally gave the Tiger King Park to his arch nemesis.
It is the ultimate, most savage irony. In June of 2020, while Joe Exotic is sitting in federal prison, Carole Baskin is legally handed the keys to the GW Zoo in Wynwood, Oklahoma.
So what does she do with it? Is there a Big Cat Rescue Oklahoma branch now?
No. She didn't want the zoo. She wanted to destroy the idea of the zoo. She sold the property with a very strict, legally binding deed restriction.
Which was?
That the land can never again be used as a zoo or to house exotic animals of any kind ever again. She salted the earth. She made sure another Joe Exotic could never rise from those ashes.
That is ruthless. I mean, it's effective, but it's a ruthless final move.
It's perfectly consistent with her stated mission. Her goal was to end that industry. Taking the most famous roadside zoo in the world and ensuring it could never be used for that purpose again is the final nail in the coffin.
We got skipped over the why is Joe in prison part, but I feel like that's the part everyone knows, the murder for hire plot.
Right. After losing the lawsuit and going bankrupt, he became obsessed and desperate. He was convicted of attempting to hire 2 different men, one of whom was an undercover FBI agent, to travel to Florida and kill her.
And he was sentenced to 22 years, later resentenced to 21.
Correct. But what's really interesting is Carole's reaction to his conviction. She wasn't out there doing victory laps or gloating. She released a very sober statement pointing out that this isn't about one bad apple, it's about a corrupt orchard. She always pivots back to the mission. This just proves why private ownership of big cats is so dangerous and needs to be banned.
Which brings us to March 2020. The documentary drops, the world shuts down. And suddenly, overnight, Carole Baskin is one of the most famous women on the planet.
And not in the way she ever wanted or expected.
We talked about the meme, but how did she react to what she saw as a betrayal? Because the story is that she thought she was participating in a very different kind of documentary.
Yes. The filmmakers, Eric Goode and Rebecca Chaiklin, pitched the project to her and her husband Howard as the Blackfish of big cats.
For context, Blackfish was that hugely influential documentary that exposed the treatment of orcas at SeaWorld and basically tanked their public image.
Exactly. Carole thought this was her moment. This was her chance to show the whole world the cruelty behind the cub petting industry she had been fighting for 20 years. They told her the Joe Exotic feud and the Don Lewis disappearance would just be, background context.
And instead, she got a 7-part series that centered the mystery of her husband's death and a music video of Joe Exotic singing "Here Kitty Kitty" with a Carole lookalike feeding meat to a tiger.
She was, by all accounts, horrified and devastated. She felt the producers completely lied to her. She accused them of framing her for her husband's death using lies and innuendos. They gave Joe this sympathetic, lovable, rogue edit, and they handed her the classic crazy cat lady villain edit.
The public reaction was immediate and brutal. I remember seeing the death threat she was getting online. It was a global pile-on.
It was. But look at what she did next. This goes back to the resilience we talked about from her teenage years. She didn't hide. She didn't delete her social media accounts and disappear. She went on Dancing with the Stars.
That was one of the most surreal moments of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Watching Carole Baskin in a full leopard print ball gown dancing a paso doble to Eye of the Tiger.
It was cringe-inducing, maybe, but it was also a brilliant power move. She was saying, you can laugh at me, but you can't erase me. You can't banish me. She used every single interview on that massive platform to talk about the cats and the legislation she was pushing.
And she fought back legally against Netflix when they announced the sequel.
She did. She and Howard sued Netflix and the production company to stop them from using any footage of her in Tiger King 2, arguing it was a breach of their original appearance contracts.
Did it work?
She ultimately lost the injunction on First Amendment grounds, but she made her point very publicly. She refused to participate in any way. She told the press the producers could lose her number.
And while the entire internet was busy making fun of her dancing and relitigating a cold case, she was actually in the final stages of achieving the one thing she set out to do 2 decades ago. Let's talk about the legislation, the real endgame.
The Big Cat Public Safety Act. This is the real legacy. This is the checkmate.
What does the act actually do? Because a lot of federal laws sound good, but are ultimately toothless.
This one has very sharp teeth. It was passed by Congress with broad bipartisan support and signed into law by President Biden on December 20th, 2022. It does 2 main things. First, it bans direct public contact with big cats. That means no more cub petting, period.
That kills the entire business model of roadside zoos.
Instantly. It evaporates it overnight. If you can't charge $50 for a photo with a baby tiger, you can't afford to keep breeding them. It cuts off the primary money supply for people like Joe Exotic and Jeff Lowe.
And what's the second major provision?
It phases out the private ownership of big cats as pets. If you already own a tiger or a lion, you're grandfathered in, but you have to register it with the federal government. You are not allowed to breed it, and you are not allowed to sell it or acquire any new ones.
So once the current generation of privately owned pet tigers dies off, there will be no more.
That's it. In 15 or 20 years, the era of the Tiger King in America will literally be extinct.
Wow. That is a much bigger deal than I think people realize. She actually did it.
She did it. And you have to understand, she spent 24 years lobbying for this. She started walking the halls of Congress in 1998. She was wearing out shoe leather in Washington, D.C., meeting with staffers, building coalitions, getting doors slammed in her face for decades.
You know, when you frame it like that, the entire epic feud with Joe Exotic feels like a complete distraction, like a sideshow to the main event.
It was a sideshow, a very loud, very dramatic sideshow that got all the attention. But Joe Exotic was a symptom of the disease. The Big Cat Public Safety Act was the cure. Joe is in prison, his zoo is a vacant lot, and the law he spent years mocking and fighting against is now the law of the land. Carole Baskin won. It wasn't pretty, and she took a lot of personal damage along the way, but on every single major front, she won.
And she's still evolving personally. We should mention she came out in 2020, during the height of all this.
Yes, in an interview, she came out as bisexual. She said she's always felt that way, but grew up in a time and place where that wasn't something you talked about.
And she's still happily married to Howard.
Very. He, by the way, deserves some kind of medal for being the most supportive, unflappable husband in recent memory.
Howard, the guy who was always there in the background, patiently recording those video messages with her, he really is a ride-or-die partner.
He's the chairman of her advisory board. He has a Harvard MBA. He's the one who helped her craft the legal strategies against Joe Exotic and Netflix. They are an incredibly formidable team.
So let's wrap this up. We started this deep dive by asking if Carole Baskin is more than just a meme. I think the answer is pretty clearly yes.
She is a figure of massive, jarring contradictions. To the internet, she's a joke and the prime suspect in a cold case. To the legal system, she's the documented victim of domestic abuse, trademark theft, and an attempted murder-for-hire plot. And to the animal rights movement, she is a legislative pioneer who successfully ended a cruel and dangerous industry in the United States.
It really makes you think about how easily we, the public, get manipulated by a good edit.
Oh.
Tiger King made millions of people sympathize with the guy who admitted on camera to shooting 5 tigers in the head to make space in their cages.
Okay.
Because he was funny and charismatic.
Right.
And it made us vilify the woman who was trying to pass a law to stop him because she was annoying, corny, a little awkward on camera.
Because she was earnest. And because she was a woman in power who refused to be bullied into silence. And the internet, as a general rule, has a real problem with that combination.
That's the heavy truth right there, isn't it? What a story.
But the scoreboard doesn't lie. The law is passed, the tigers are safer, and Carole Baskin is still standing.
Well, I am never going to look at a potato the same way again.
Yeah.
Or a Datsun truck, for that matter.
The potato is a symbol of resilience, of using what you have at hand to escape.
It really is. Thank you for walking me through all this. It was so much wilder and more complex than I remembered.
It's always in the source material. You just have to be willing to read past the headlines and the memes.
Well said. All right, that's it for this deep dive. Our advice to you: don't buy a tiger. Definitely don't join a murder plot. And we'll catch you on the next one.